Tonight, we're talking about those places that hum with life during the day, but turn into something else entirely when the sun dips below the horizon. Places where the silence isn't just quiet, it's heavy. It presses down on you, whispers in your ear, and makes you wonder what else might be lurking in the shadows when everyone else has gone home. Sarah knew this feeling all too well. She worked the graveyard shift at Grant's department store, an old relic of a building that had seen generations come and go. And what she saw there, what she experienced, well, it's the kind of story that crawls under your skin and stays there long after the lights come back on. Grant's wasn't just any department store. It was a local landmark, a multi-story monument to consumerism built back in the 1920s. It had grand marble staircases, polished wooden display cases that gleamed under the soft light, and those old-fashioned elevators with the accordion gates. During the day, it was a bustling hive, filled with shoppers, the murmur of conversations, and the cheerful jingle of the tills. But at 10 p.m., the doors locked, the last customers filtered out, and the lights dimmed to an eerie half-glow, leaving vast, echoing halls. Sarah had taken the overnight stocking job a few months prior, desperate for the higher pay. She'd heard the whispers, of course, the local legends about Grant's. Old man Grant himself, who supposedly died in his office on the 5th floor, still watching over his empire. A child who got lost in the store during a blackout in the 50s and was never found. Sarah, being pragmatic, brushed them off as old wives' tales, perfect for Halloween, but nothing to lose sleep over. She was wrong. Her first few weeks were uneventful, if a little lonely. She'd blast her music, push carts of new inventory, and try to ignore the vast emptiness around her. But then, things started to shift, subtly at first, a feeling. Like someone was standing just behind her, always out of sight. The air would suddenly drop a few degrees, raising goosebumps on her arms, even though the store's heating system was notoriously cranky. One night she was in the women's apparel section on the 3rd floor, folding sweaters. It was around 2 a.m. The only sound was the distant hum of the refrigerators in the ground floor deli and her own breathing. Then she heard it. A faint thump. It came from the men's suits department just around the corner. She paused, listened, nothing, just the oppressive silence. She shrugged it off, probably the building settling. Grant's was old, after all. A few minutes later, another sound. A soft, almost metallic clinking. It sounded like hangers, but there was no one else in the store. She walked slowly towards the men's section, peering around a rack of jackets. Nothing was out of place. The suits hung perfectly, their empty forms swaying slightly in the faint air currents. She squinted, then froze. One of the mannequins, a tall, faceless figure in a pinstripe suit, seemed to be different. Its arm, which had been straight down, was now slightly bent, as if reaching for something. Her heart pounded. She must have misremembered. Or maybe a colleague had moved it earlier. It was illogical to think otherwise, but the incidents grew. A week later, she was organizing toys in the children's department on the 2nd floor. Brightly colored plastic, soft plush animals, all arranged meticulously. She'd just finished stacking a display of building blocks when she heard a low giggle. It was soft, melodic, like a child's. It echoed, bouncing off the shelves. Sarah went rigid. She wasn't alone. Someone had to be here. A prankster, maybe. A homeless person who somehow snuck in. "Hello," she called out, her voice shaky. Only silence answered her. She moved cautiously between the aisles, scanning the dimly lit space. Nothing, no one. Her flashlight beam danced over rows of dolls, their painted smiles unsettling in the gloom. The giggle came again, closer this time, seeming to originate from behind a tall display of action figures. She crept forward, her hand gripping the metal pole of her cart. She rounded the corner, her breath catching in her throat. A small red ball lay in the middle of the aisle. It hadn't been there a minute ago. It was one of the bouncy balls from a display just feet away. And then, as she watched, it slowly, deliberately, began to roll. Not a quick, bouncing roll, but a slow, almost gentle movement, as if pushed by an unseen hand, until it stopped directly at her feet. Sarah didn't scream. She couldn't. A cold dread seeped into her bones. She backed away slowly at first, then turned and sprinted towards the staff elevator, her heart hammering against her ribs. She slammed the button for the ground floor, her eyes glued to the closing doors, half expecting to see a small, pale face peeking out from between the toys. After that night, Sarah started to believe. She began researching grants. Old newspaper clippings spoke of the founder, Jeremiah Grant, a stern, childless man who adored his store more than anything. And then, she found it. A small article, almost hidden, about a tragic accident in the 1930s. A young girl, about 7 years old, had wandered away from her mother during the Christmas rush. She was found hours later, trapped in an old, rarely used service elevator shaft on the top floor, an old, red, bouncy ball clutched in her hand. She hadn't survived the fall. Her name was Lily. The information didn't make Sarah feel better, it made it worse. Now she knew what she was dealing with, or rather who. She tried to switch shifts, but there were no openings. She needed the job, so she began to adapt. She'd wear headphones, even if no music was playing, just to have something in her ears other than the silence. She avoided the children's department entirely, but Lily, or whatever entity it was, seemed to grow bolder. The mannequins. They became her biggest fear. Their blank, unblinking eyes seemed to follow her as she moved. She'd swear they'd shift their positions slightly whenever she looked away. One night, while pushing a heavy cart past a row of them on the 3rd floor, she felt a distinct tug on her hair. She spun around, convinced a rogue piece of metal had snagged her. Nothing. But when she glanced back at the mannequin closest to her, its arm, which had been down by its side, was now raised, its hands splayed open, as if it had just reached out. A chill colder than any she'd ever felt raced through her. She dropped her cart and ran. The climax of her terror came on a particularly stormy night. Rain lashed against the old windows of Grant's, and the wind howled like a banshee through the ventilation shafts. Sarah was on the 5th floor, a seldom used area, mostly filled with dusty storage rooms and old office spaces. This was Old Man Grant's floor, according to legend. She was supposed to be inventorying some old furniture, but her nerves were frayed. Every creak of the old building, every gust of wind, sounded like a footstep. She heard it then, a faint, almost melodic hum. Like a lullaby, but distorted, tinny. It seemed to come from deeper within the floor, past the storage rooms, towards the very back where the old, derelict service elevator shaft was, the one where Lily had died. Sarah felt an irresistible pull, a morbid curiosity mixed with pure, unadulterated terror. She couldn't make herself turn and run. Her feet moved on their own, guided by an unseen force, towards the sound. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of dust and something else, something cloying and sweet, like wilting lilies. The humming grew louder, a mournful, childlike tune. She reached the end of the hallway, a dark, narrow corridor leading to a heavy, rust-stained metal door. The service elevator, she knew it. The door was ajar, a sliver of inky blackness visible within. As she peered closer, the humming stopped abruptly. A different sound took its place, a soft, rhythmic scratching coming from inside the shaft. Scratch. Scratch, scratch, then a whisper, right next to her ear. So close she felt a cold breath on her neck. "You found me," Sarah gasped, leaping back, tripping over her own feet. She fell hard, her flashlight clattering to the ground and rolling into the open elevator shaft, plunging the corridor into near total darkness. The only light now came from the faint emergency glow strips, casting long, grotesque shadows. She scrambled to her feet, her eyes wide, desperately trying to make sense of the gloom. And then she saw it. In the gaping maw of the elevator shaft, clinging to the grimy metal cables that descended into the darkness, was a figure. Small, childlike, its form was indistinct, wavering, almost like a distortion in the air. But she could make out a small hand, raised towards her, and 2 glowing red pinpricks for eyes that burned with an ancient, sorrowful malice. And in its other hand, clutched tight, was a worn, red, bouncy ball. The figure didn't move. It just hung there, suspended in the dark, its red eyes fixed on her, and the sound of the rhythmic scratching continued, echoing from deeper within the shaft. It wasn't the sound of nails on metal, but something far more horrifying. It sounded like a child's fingers, desperately trying to claw their way out of a confined space. A wave of pure, primal fear washed over Sarah. This wasn't a ghost story anymore. This was real. The sorrow, the anger, the trapped despair of that child, it was all pouring out of those glowing red eyes. She felt paralyzed, unable to move, unable to breathe. Then the small, ethereal figure slowly, deliberately, began to raise its free hand towards her, a faint, translucent arm extending, reaching. The red, bouncy ball in its other hand pulsed with a dim, internal light. The fear finally broke her paralysis. With a guttural scream that tore through the silence of the store, Sarah turned and ran. She didn't look back. She stumbled down the grand marble staircase, 2 steps at a time, her legs burning, her heart threatening to burst from her chest. She didn't care about anything but getting out. She fumbled with the emergency exit door on the ground floor, shoved the bar, and burst out into the pouring rain, not bothering to clock out, not bothering to grab her bag. She just ran, not stopping until she reached her car, locked the doors, and sped away, leaving Grant's department store, a dark, silent monolith behind her. Sarah never went back. She called in sick the next day, and then just didn't show up again. She lost the job, but she didn't care. She still sees those glowing red eyes in her nightmares. She still hears that mournful humming, that terrible scratching. Every time she sees a red, bouncy ball, a cold dread washes over her. Grant's department store is still there, a fixture in the town, bustling with shoppers during the day, oblivious to the history that stains its walls. But at night, when the doors lock and the lights dim, that old building takes on a different life. And somewhere on the 5th floor, in the dark, forgotten service elevator shaft, a little girl named Lily still waits, still plays, still scratches, and if you listen closely enough, perhaps you can still hear the faint, melodic hum of a lullaby carried on the wind, just before the doors of the old service elevator creak open, revealing nothing but the hungry darkness within.